I am many embarrassing things, but one consistent embarrassing quality about me is that I was and am a fan of Glee. And as such, I am particularly thrilled to be talking about tonight's episode, or this week's episode, or yesterday's episode, or whatever you want to call it, of Only Murders in the Building. I know we have other TV to be talking about, a lot of other things. We've got books for once, respectable topics, but let it be known that I, an ex Glee fan, am very excited to be talking about Only Murders in the Building this week, featuring Jane Lynch. Kate, hi, how are you? We're here to talk about TV and books, and you probably have
Mhm.
news for us.
I do have news, although it's not a lot. But I'm pretty good this week. Did you say something?
You like froze there for a second. I wasn't sure if your sentence was done. I was afraid I was about to interrupt you. I am glad to hear that you are pretty good this week. You're wearing bright, cheery, fall orange. Um, what news do we have? Is there anything exciting that we should be talking about?
So this week we had the 9-year anniversary of Arrow.
Yes, we
That went
did.
all over Twitter, and I feel like
Mm-hmm.
that needs to be mentioned. Then there's
Mm-hmm.
just this little, we're not terribly excited about it. We may not even watch it, but there's probably going to be a spinoff about Agatha Harkness. We may watch it. I don't know.
That may have been a big piece of news, I suppose.
Yes.
I'm literally so excited you don't even know. Like, you don't understand. Like, I cosplay, well, you, Kate, understand, but the royal you do not understand. I cosplayed Agatha when I had a million other options, including Scarlet Witch, who I'm going to cosplay for Halloween, by the way, but I'm going to be cosplaying the OG Scarlet Witch, so the original one in the series of movies, not the original comic one, which, like, unpopular opinion, I don't like her original comic book costume, but that's a topic for another day. I'm so excited for Agatha's spin-off.
Yeah, I mean, we all are aware how excited I was about WandaVision, and I think you might actually beat me out of being excited about Agatha Harkness because you really liked her.
I really did. This is very much catered to my interests. I um I really think it's also just a great opportunity to showcase more of what Catherine Hahn can do. So excellent choice on their part. They can do this without, messing up whatever movie plan they have for Wanda's character. And maybe they can still bring in Wanda from time to time. I think that would be great. I think Kate froze again, but I'm not sure. Or there's just a wild delay. Kate, Earth to Kate, any other news for this week that we should be talking about?
You glitched out again, but I'm assuming you're asking if there's any more news.
I did.
If that is the case, there is. So I'm gonna really, really start to flash my nerd card here, but I don't care. I'm proud of it. I, in the past year, also started watching or listening mainly to a live show that plays D&D. If you're familiar, it's called Critical Role.
I'm
What,
familiar.
okay, 2 years ago, they had a Kickstarter raise like $11 million or something crazy like that to get an animated series made about one of their games. And on February 4th, you're finally going to release the first season on Amazon Prime.
That is really cool. I think I had seen them trending on Twitter the other day, and they trend frequently, I guess, whenever they like go live or release new episodes of them playing D&D live. But I'm familiar. I've heard of them. I think like my husband watches them or whatever. But I didn't realize that they had their own animated series. That's pretty cool. I see a lot of people like cosplaying their original characters at like cons and stuff, which tells me they're a big deal. Am I glitching or are you glitching? Okay, Kate's
I heard you
frozen.
say was they were trending.
The last thing you heard me say was they were trending. Okay. Yeah, I was just saying I was vaguely familiar they were popular, but I didn't know they had a series coming out. That's pretty cool.
Yep, they were trending like 2 or 3 times last week about just various different things, and that was one of them.
That's pretty cool. I have us up in another tab so like I can see it like the YouTube stream of us just so I can see like which is glitching and which is freezing and when it's like a me problem or whatever. Anyways, um any other news before we dive into only murders in the building?
That is all I have for this week.
Okay. We had Only Murders in the Building, episode 9, entitled Double Vision. And I'm introducing this episode the way I would typically introduce a live in which I'm only here to talk about one episode of television. Like, we are live here to chat about tonight's episode of whatever entitled blah, blah, blah. And like, we're talking about nothing else. And that's kind of because I literally want to talk about nothing else except Only Murders in the Building. I will definitely talk about other TV, but oh my God, this was such a good episode. I was so impressed with the amount of character development in this single episode alone. And it was also like moving the mystery forward. And it was also like really cool and really shocking and delivered the why is there a bassoon in a sex toy drawer, what a bassoon cleaner in a sex toy drawer, whatever it was called. That was very much like a Shonda Rhimes-esque line. Okay, so I've obviously given away what I thought of this week's episode. What did you think of this week's episode?
I mean, I loved it. I love their continual like light-handed use of themes. So each week there's a slightly new theme. So obviously this week was working with a theme of like insecurity on Charles's part and like this idea that everything that like he has, somebody's going to have the opposite. Like somebody's going to take away from him. So this concept that he already has been cheated, he has history of being cheated on. He has a history of feeling overshadowed, and then the big reveal at the end of how she's lied and the assumptions we can make about these like short toy drawer. Um, it was a really interesting use of that theme. And then I will say, because of various reasons, I know what a bassoon cleaner looks like. And I am honestly just ashamed of that I didn't put that together earlier because they had it out several episodes ago and I didn't think anything of it. And then this episode, they pull it back out and I was like, that's a bassoon cleaner. And then they're talking.
Okay, for me, Kate has frozen again. And let me just say, while Kate is getting unfrozen, because I'm also watching it on the YouTube side and I can see she's frozen there, I did not recognize that as a bassoon cleaner. And I didn't even know that they had really pulled it out and shown it before. That is news to me. I guess that would be a clue to like earlier on when particularly when bassoon player lady was like new and being like kind of I guess like not gelling with the group, it would seem suspicious. But now I feel like it has to be a fake out. Like I feel like she's lying about a lot of stuff, but I don't think she's the murderer. What do you think?
You know, and then it's one of those things that there's still a whole episode left. And I think they've set up a history of having plenty of time to do several fake outs in a whole episode that I think that they have plenty of time to do another fake out. Who I think they're going to fake it out for. I basically kind of surrendered the fact that I don't know who did it truly. I don't have enough evidence laid out. This is definitely a show that's far more about revealing the details as you go along, and you might catch a glimmer of two, but it's not as they're not going to reveal as much as like an action.
Right. And
But
I guess
I,
if you think
if
of
I had
like,
to like
and
go on
sorry, I think I
instinct,
might be
I
interrupting
don't
you, but
think
also
she
you
killed
froze,
him.
so I don't know. If you think of like the bassoon player and the lies that she has told, one big major lie, what they presented as like, I guess, most shocking at the end of this episode was the fact that she is not first chair bassoonist, right? In the context of being a
Mhm.
murderer, however, that's an innocuous lie. That's a lie that has to do with like insecurity about the fact that this really young girl, took over first chair over her. It's a lie of insecurity rather than murder. And the fact that that's being used to taint her character rather than just make her character look insecure, I have to believe she's not the murderer. I don't know. I could be so wrong. Like, I'm not always necessarily good at solving these things. I'll more so pick out who like I want to be the murderer and who I don't want to be the murderer. And I'll just like anchor and go with that idea. But in this case, I really think it's not her, but I don't know who I think it is.
I think they could make a convincing ending for either way, whether she is or she isn't, whether it's that this was a live insecurity and that they're going to accuse her and then it's going to devolve there, or that we're going to, like, the final episode is an unraveling of all the lies she's told and the manipulations that she's made, and that she's like a compulsive liar or something like that. I think they could do either one, but I think instinctually I have to say that I would vote more along the lines of saying that she's not the killer. Um, Again, just kind of reverting to the structure that we have 30 minutes to explore, and they really like to kind of give you the last hit at the last minute. They've done it every episode, really. I don't think that they would have said, hey, given us such a big flashing lights saying, hey, she's really suspicious in this very last, like episode before the last, just
So
from like a storytelling
here's a
structure.
question then. My question is, if whether she is or whether she isn't, do you think that the murderer will be revealed in season one? I'm going to guess yes. I'm fairly confident we get the answer to who killed Tim Kono next episode. What do you think?
I think we will, and then I think it'll immediately spur on another murder mystery, um, because obviously they need another murder to go on or some other crime to go on. But I don't think that they're going to want to carry this over, especially since I don't think that they were initially renewed for a second season. I think they probably want, at least because it is the first season, to wrap it all up in a nice bow. And then even if they hadn't had the second season, that is a fun way to end the series. Be like, oh well, you guys know what they're going to be doing is they're going to try to solve every murder that ever happens ever now. Um, but I agree. I think they're going to solve, or at least think they solve, the case again at the end of the season.
Not only do I think they're going to solve the case at the end of this season, for some reason, I'm completely convinced. No, my false sense of
They're just
confidence.
cutting out
I'm
left
cut.
and right.
Oh goodness. This is probably a me. Well, I don't know if it's a me problem. I'll figure out in 2 seconds when the YouTube stream catches up to the delay. I am convinced with my typical false sense of confidence that I know who the next murderer will be, so who the next person to be murdered, and what the plot of the next season will consequently be. Okay. I think the next person to be murdered will be the building manager from this season, the like hard ass lady who was going to kick them out. And I think she will not be murdered in the building, but that the suspect will be somebody in the building. So she may be found murdered or like disappeared or something like that. Like we may not even necessarily know she's murdered, but I think she's going to like stop showing up and they're like either trying to find the body or trying to figure out who killed her. And it won't literally be like a murder in the building, but it's like tied to the building because she is the building manager. For some reason, I'm so convinced that this is true.
If if you had asked me who I thought would next be murdered, before Jan was stabbed, I would have said Jan. Now that she's already been stabbed, I would either say the building manager or Howard, the cat guy.
Oh,
either
yeah.
of those two people, either of those two people seem like important enough supporting characters with enough annoying. Um, I would agree that. I mean, I would assume that there's probably more motive to kill the manager than Howard, but still.
Yeah. I'm so excited for season two. I really do think we're going to get the murder revealed next episode. I'm just thrilled. I I really enjoyed this week's episode. Okay, so what did you think of Jane Lynch coming in as his stunt double? Who is the casting director behind this that was like, you know who Steve Martin's stunt double should be in this? Jane Lynch. Like, it's just so brilliant, and I don't know who would have ever thought of it. Like, I was just the premise alone just had me enthralled.
It was it was hilarious, and she played it off so well. Um, but the best part of it is that there is a shocking similarity, and I mean, they're the same height, they have the same hair. It is very shocking. I also like that they never really touched on or addressed the fact that she dresses the same with him after
Hmm.
all these years. And each scene, even if it was a different outfit, it was the same. They were wearing the same thing, same shoes, same glasses, everything. I was like, what in the world?
The shot of them both, I don't know if, I think they were both like taking a sip of coffee or something at the same time. Like, they just nailed, like, she nailed his mannerisms so well. Like, this was just comedic gold between these two. Fantastic. Really loved the scene towards the end of the episode where it's like a slightly touchy feely moment where she's talking to him about like his insecurities. That was really well done without like suddenly going from, touchy feely, or like without going from like comedy to feel good too fast. It wasn't like, oh, we're in the final 20% of the episode, so we suddenly need to like care about feeling. It was so good. I just loved it. It was, like watching the Mabel and what's the guy that's not played by Steve Martin? Frank?
Oliver?
Oliver. I can't remember names. Watching Mabel and Oliver like enter and see her and think it was uh, Steve Martin's character. So good.
Yes.
So good. I really felt for, why I'm not rooting for Jan to be the murderer is I really felt for her when she was, I in my mind I filled in the blank that she was, after all this time, going to be first chair bassoonist, and then somebody who looks like they are, somewhere between your age and my age comes in and takes over. Like, I really just felt for her. It made me really sad, and therefore she can't possibly be a
I mean,
murderer, because
yeah,
since when do I
it's
empathize with murderers? For me, Kate froze again, but I could be crazy.
did
Are
I
you?
freeze it then?
Yeah, and there's like a little message above the screen that says Kate left, and you clearly didn't leave
After
because you're
this one
right
this week
there.
is just us going, are you still there? Are you still there?
Literally. If there's any other platform that will be better, I will switch. I've switched like 15 times before, and I will do it 15 times again before I die. Like, okay, so what were you saying?
I have no idea who's freezing because every time you speak, it comes out like you're a drunk robot. I have no idea who's bitching at this point. But um, to answer what I think your question was about like Jan, is I can understand why they found her annoying and why she was hindering the investigation and why they threw her out. But I can also understand that there was a in the matter of her vulnerability, which is an interesting like mirror to Charles, because I we can delve into the whole metaphor of having a stunt double there, and the stunt double was kind of the one that always got in his way, which is a metaphor for the fact that he's always the person that gets in his own way. He's the one that kind of hinders his own life. Um, but the the ending with Chan having to kind of see this younger person get that first chair, it was something that kind of did show, okay, she is a real person. She's not a caricature. We are we are actually doing something important with this character. Pay attention, which was nice because for most of the series, she has been played kind of as caricature, as a person for Charles to be in a scene with. And it was the first time that I truly was like, okay, I feel for you rather than I know I'm supposed to feel for you.
Yeah, and like when she was trying to kind of join the group and they were pushing her out, on the one hand, I could see that they were doing that to try to emphasize that there was a group dynamic in place between the trio and that the trio had like bonded and they were in their no new friends stage, right? And it worked to that end, but it also does make you feel bad for her in a way. I think what's interesting about having her be suspicious to this degree is that it will kind of force once again the trio to have this discussion of like, are they really trying to solve the murder, or were they just trying to make a podcast, or were they just trying to avenge Tim's death, or were they just trying to feel smart and useful again? Because each of them has their motivation for doing this, and it's possible none of the three of them really care to catch a murderer. So there's going to be the position where if it's not somebody like their sponsors who they already hate being the murderer, and it's somebody that they care about to some extent, are they actually going to go through with it and be like, justice, even if like it's the person they're in love with or the person their friend is in love with? You know what I mean? Like, this presents them an interesting opportunity to test what their true sense of justice is, which is helpful to kind of get out of the way in season one. I think a lot of times, for like, if you think of your typical like cop of the week type of show, they don't really test that until later, in multiple seasons later. Like season one of your typical case of the week, cop of the week situation, you have, you're going after some big bad, and then later on it's a big bad that has personal ties to the detective, and then it's finally a big bad that's like it was somebody they actually cared about, and that's when you're testing their sense of justice. Having this as a potential season one is an interesting choice, because I'm not necessarily convinced in the trio's, innate sense of justice at this time, but I like them all the better for it.
I I don't know if I even really want them to necessarily define their sense of justice, because for as much as I am a like character development over plot person, I think this show is very interesting. I realize this. They have all had a small arc. Like they have all grown and developed over the show, and it feels very much like a character-driven story because it's pretty much all same plot or same setting, meeting new people every week, kind of delving into the details, and not a lot of actual action, but more of like a reaction. So we get to know their personalities very well, their motivations, their position in life, but we've really only seen them for 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't seen a massive arc. There's no big change. So to me, what's interesting is it's more of a show that you just kind of get to exist with them as people. And for me, I can very much see and understand and enjoy the motivations of all of them. I see Mabel doing this because she's probably in it most for the justice. She wants to investigate all the problems that have happened with her friends. And whether she liked Tim by the time that he died or not, he was at one point her friend, and this is a close to home subject for her. I think it also kind of was the happy days memories for her because she used to be so into the investigating a murder mystery kind of thing. And then with Oliver, it's really just he has that innate need to be an entertainer, performer, and he can't he's not able to do it in the same medium that he used to. But this is a new medium with new potential. And to be honest, he just needs money for a house. Like he just needs money to stay in that house or in the apartment. Um, and then with Charles, I mean, he we started off and he is so reclusive. He is so much always in his own way that he really just needs it for the camaraderie. He needs it for the friends. So I think it's one of those things that in like a superhero show or a lot of like other more intense dramatic crime shows, I do think it's important that we do an analysis of justice. But at least for the first few seasons, if we get multiple seasons of the show, I don't necessarily need an exploration of their justice because they seem like rather neutral, good people. Where it's like, yeah, murder's wrong. We need to like prevent murder, but at the same time, they're not swooping in as heroic heroes. They're not caped crusaders. They're not going to put themselves in more jeopardy than is justifiable. They're not going to sacrifice their life for others in this situation. They're doing this in a lot of ways for self-fulfillment, which is a perfectly understandable reason. And it actually makes the whole story more relatable and more funny because it truly does feel like they're just three people making a mediocre podcast about a murder that happened in a building that was sponsored by the guy that murdered somebody else.
You said something that I it really made me think. You were saying when talking about a sense of justice, this sort of base idea of like murder is wrong, we should prevent it. And I wonder if that's even where they're at. Like, are they thinking about stopping a murderer, like somebody hypothetically who might be killing somebody else? Or are they interested in catching a murderer and exacting justice or exacting revenge? Because I think that's one of the things that differentiates this from a typical setting in which somebody's solving a murder. Usually, if somebody's solving a murder, it's like a cop, a detective, a special investigator type of thing. And they're trying to, like, I hate to be cliche, but they're trying to, like, get bad guys off the streets to prevent future crime type of thing, which is like a whole nut shell to unpack it. I'm mixing metaphors. It's a whole other thing. Here, they're trying to make a podcast, and technically they're trying to catch a murderer, which would result in the murderer ceasing to murder. But for the persistence of their jobs and the podcasts and stuff, they're not particularly motivated in like stopping this guy. In fact, it seemed like in this episode, one of their key motivations was proving it wasn't them so they don't get kicked out of the building.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think if I had to point to any of them having a higher level of justice, like let's get this guy, this is a murderer, this is bad, it would be Mabel.
Yeah.
Simply because she has more of an emotional investment in it. If either one of them were more emotionally invested in Tim Kono, it could have been done another way. But to that end, I think it's always kind of been less about the murder, less about the wrongness or the justification, like the justice of killing or like finding the killer. And it's far more about like how it affects the people around you, motivation, things like that. I don't think they were, and I think it's kind of a profound take in the show how unprofound the characters are considering this. This is kind of when you look at like a superhero show or detective show, because it is so much central into the story, there's a lot of gravitas put on the murder, which in real life, it's sad to say, it's kind of like you hear about it and you're so removed from it, even in Mabel's setting where she knew Tim, but she wasn't really friends with Tim anymore. She's more invested in Tim aspect of it because of the Oscar aspect of it. Um, but there's this level of, yeah, this has happened, and now I want to solve the puzzle. Kind of like I always like, go crazy theories. They're doing it more for the theory of it. They're doing it more to prove a point that they know who it is. They're doing it for the entertainment value, rather than wanting to bring him in for any justice gained. Like you said, they were more concerned this episode about not getting kicked out of the apartment, which in terms of, do I care that Tim Kono was dead versus getting kicked out of my apartment? It sounds extremely selfish and to a point like morally vague. But in reality, is it necessarily unexpected or uncommon for that to be like a progression, that after you're being removed so much from a death, there's less and less of empathetic care, and it's more of like, let's get this guy. I don't want to be murdered. I don't want to be blamed for this. Like, yada yada yada. The kind of non-committal idea we all have, like, oh, that's bad. We need to catch that guy, but there's really a less personal investment in actually catching him, and it's more the personal effects of what that means for them. So in this episode, it specifically meant that they wouldn't get kicked out of the apartment, rather than, yay, we got the guy.
I think the level of personal of the crime is really interesting here. It's it's personal in that it's in their building. It's impersonal in that they don't really know him, except for Mabel, who does know him. But even then, that has become impersonal. And whether they really know each other or are just doing a podcast, it's such an interesting setup on trying to figure out the level of investment they all have. I will say we only have 20 minutes left, and I know that you did some reading this week, and I want to hear about what you read this week. And I also want to, for a very brief second, plug Riverdale, even though I know neither you nor anybody in this world probably has any interest in watching it. Okay, what did you read this week?
So I finished reading this book called My Plain Jane, which is a parody paranormal adaptation of Jane Eyre, in which Jane Eyre goes to school with Charlotte Bronte, and Jane Eyre can also see ghosts.
Naturally.
And throughout the story, naturally. So she is friends with a ghost the entirety of the book. The whole entire plot line of her getting married or almost marrying Rochester. Oh, brain just stopped working.
You're catching the Cammie disease where you can't remember men's names.
It was because I don't like him. I don't want him in my brain.
That's why I don't remember any man's name.
But you find out that the reason he's so awful is because he is possessed by a ghost. They temporarily make Jane Eyre possessed by a ghost. They all become ghost hunters. Some of them die and come back to life. It's a great old time. And it's written by these three women, and they have it's a whole series of just like Jane, like figures that are named Jane, and it's all parody stories about paranormal ideas, and it's tons of fourth wall breaking and jokes being made. There's in the first few lines of that book, there's a reference to Ghostbusters. It keeps you on your toes the entire time, and you have to be like shaking your head laughing about just the audacity of the references. It's amazing. And then after that, I immediately started reading the third book in that series, which is called My Calamity Jane, which is about Calamity Jane. And it also has Annie Oakley in it. And it follows a similar thing, but that Supernatural is about werewolves. And things such as saying that, oh, what did I tell you it said? It had some reference in it.
I will pull it
Oh,
back
that
up.
her folding clothes brought her joy.
Oh, yes, a Marie Kondo reference.
Yes,
Kate was
in the
explaining this
middle
to
of
me,
the.
and I'm like, you had me at Calamity Jane and Annie Oakley. Like, where I was raised, those were basically gods. Like,
I mean, it's hilarious, the just the amount of the entire time there is a fourth wall winking at you. The fact that they basically don't even try to hide like who the villain of the story is. It's more about how funny they can make it, which is honestly awesome. Um, because like just the concept that Calamity Jane is a werewolf and that Annie Oakley's husband Frank is a werewolf is just it's fantastic. It mind blown. Just the idea, the concepts here, highbrow concepts.
that sounds fantastic. Um, I will tell you what I read this week, but I'm only 37% of the way through the book per my Google Books app. Okay, so it's by an author named B.A. Paris, and I've read like all of her stuff up to this point. She does kind of like psychological murder mysteries, I guess I would say, where, like it's not like gory kind of murder mysteries. It's like you're trying to figure out who the murderer is, and a lot of times there's just like, somebody's messing with your head. You're trying to figure out what's actually real and who's messing with your head. So the reason I want to bring this up is because I have a question for you. So, the whole premise for the first third of the book, and I'm just going to give you mild spoilers. This is not a major spoiler. This is something you know within the first third of the book, or if you read the summary on the back of the book, is there's this a lovely young couple. They are our leads. The girl and the couple's our lead. Who the guy works in the middle of the city. The woman kind of like worked from home in the countryside, and they kind of like meet in the middle. And they find this house in London to purchase, and it's in this like new-ish, like within the last 10 years, developed gated community, right? And it's mentioned that the husband was the one that was looking for it. Like he did the house hunting because it was closer to him. And he mentioned that because it had been sitting on the market a while, they were able to get it for like way lower than asking price. Like it's a really nice gated community, and it would have been, a pretty good amount above the price range. Except for it had been sitting on the market a while. And then pretty quickly in the book, you learn that the last couple that had inhabited the house, the woman was murdered, and the wife was murdered, and the husband committed suicide. I'm not sure if his suicide was committed in the house, but her murder occurred within the house. And our lead character has an absolute meltdown. Like she finds out, essentially, I'm going to say she finds out from a reporter who like contacts her asking about it. Like, what's it like to live in like a house where somebody was murdered, type of thing. She loses her mind. She will not go upstairs. She won't even enter the house for multiple chapters, like sleeping at a neighbor's house, like having panic attacks just with the thought of being in the house, is like freaking out at the realtor over like having to, supposedly not told them about it, whatever. So my question is, this is an A+ book, highly recommend. Is it that big of a deal? Am I like a sociopath for thinking that like that's a bit of an over the top reaction to finding out that tragedy has occurred in the house with the previous owners? Am I crazy?
I mean, I'm not going to pass judgment simply because I'm sure there are people that do respond that way. However, I have a very like realistic, my generation's very nihilistic. So
Yes.
I'm kind of just like, hey, we all die.
Right.
And in the level of I don't really care. I mean, like deep clean that.
Yeah.
make sure we're all good on security. But that would be more my concern than the fact that there's already been death. Like, I may not like hang out terribly. Like, I may not want to sleep in that room just because that gives the heebie-jeebies. But rather, I don't think I would ever have that strong of a response.
I don't think I would have that strong of a response either. Like, I guess like especially if you consider like in this particular story, the housing, you know, place that they're at, the community is mostly like new build houses, like houses that I think they were like built in the last 7 years, and then the previous inhabitants had been in it for, you know, a few years before tragedy struck, whatever. But if you think of like old houses, like houses that get passed down from generations, or, you know, like some sort of, you know, kind of vintage homes from like 1940s or whatever, like you have to presume multiple people have died in that house. Hopefully, most of them dying under like peaceful, happy situations, you know, having lived a long, full, happy life. But you have to presume that there's all kinds of like tragedy and somebody in whatever time got smallpox or whatever the case may be, and you just have to like mentally distance yourself from it. I don't know. The book is so good, and this author's like consistently fantastic. So I'm so sure this will be great to like watch her. Like, she's gonna descend into madness, and we're gonna have to be like watching, you know, through the narration to figure out like what's real and what's not real. And like everything with like the neighbors is so like creepy and interesting. And I'm like putting pieces together, and I trust no one. Like, it's so great. But just this one little premise was like, because in previous mysteries that I've read by this author, they will have certain premises. She will give a certain premise from like, that's creepy. Like, I would have immediately left. Like, what's wrong with you? And with this one, I was like, I don't see it.
Well, I mean, even just from like a physics standpoint, if it were even to kind of go on to where you were saying about like old buildings, like a lot of times were actually built to benefit from natural ventilation. So like they were made basically for the cool air in the basements to flow up. That's why you always see like the creaking doors and like the gusts of wind that we're supposed not supposed to be there. That's why that happens.
Mhm.
Sorry to spoil it for anybody who believes in ghosts, but that's why that happens.
Kate doesn't
Um,
believe in ghosts. Kate doesn't believe in astrology. That's so fair.
that's right in that. But um, I, if it's a newly built house, I mean, I believe that actually in the UK they still kind of construct more using natural ventilation than in the US. In the UK, they don't use AC units like we use them here.
Hmm.
But still, you would not get the same amount of like cold drafts that
Hmm.
you would have gotten in an old house. Therefore, I would not have been constantly spooked by the cold breeze passing by.
Right.
So the concept to me that it's a new house and somebody died, yeah, like the idea that it's a murder kind of wakes me out more than anything else, because I'm like, we all have had like we've all heard of grandparents passing. We've all heard it like that happens in houses a lot of times. I don't
Right.
understand what the problem is.
Right. That's exactly where I'm at. And like when I tell you she was like freaking out, and other than that, like she's not a particularly neurotic lead. I'm just like, there's something going on here. I don't know. But there's like other stuff that happens that then proceeds to like, okay, I would freak out about this, that, and the other. Like, yes. But the period where she was freaking out about the house, I now like have this desire to go around and just ask like everybody I'm talking to, like, would you freak out if you found out that there was a murder that occurred in the house that you're now living in?
Yeah.
Happy Halloween.
Yes.
Okay, we've got 9 minutes left. I know what else I watched this week, and it was Riverdale, and I caught up on it. What did you watch this week other than Only Murders in the Building?
Absolutely nothing.
You had your chance to stop me from talking about Riverdale. So here it goes.
Oh, I watched school videos. I watched lectures. That's why I know about architectural heat transfer that I just went on a whole diatribe about. I'm sorry about that. That's why I did that.
For the next 8
I did a whole
minutes,
paper.
Kate will give us a lecture on solar efficiency and architecture. Okay, so I caught up on Riverdale, and let me tell you why. No, let me show you why. This is why. Betty and Archie got back
Twitter has not
together.
let me not know.
I'm sorry.
I said Twitter did not allow me not to know why.
You can't escape. Let me tell you, when I first started this series, I did not care about Betty and Archie. In fact, I don't think I even liked them at first. I wasn't necessarily like a Betty and Jughead kind of person, but like I'm always going to have a soft spot when like CW cast members fall into the CW curse and drink the CW water and fall in love with each other. Never ceases to not entertain me. I'm always here for it. So like the whole Bughead thing was cute while it lasted. I don't care. But now, like episodes later, seasons later, whatever, Betty and Archie have fantastic chemistry, much better chemistry than they had when they started. And I think it's because when the season started, like he was like kind of young. Like, don't get me wrong, half a decade too old to be playing a high schooler, but young by CW standards for playing a high schooler. And now they're like convincingly adults, and they did like a flash forward, and they're like adults, and they're young career, whatever. I think they're supposed to be like mid to late 20s or something like that, which is like about what they are. It's so good. I shouldn't be clapping this loud next to my mic, but it was fantastic catching up. Cheryl is as great as ever. And this last week was the finale. Within that, they set up for like, okay, so Betty and Archie aren't like together. Like it was just like in the finale of this last season, they basically seem like they're going to be like giving it a shot or whatever, but they haven't given it a shot yet. So we're going to see them get together next season. We're going to see Cheryl basically take on the entire town of Riverdale, which I love. It's so good. Everything they did to set up for next season is so good. Everybody who hates on this show is wrong. I stand by that. Thank you for listening.
Whereas I am here just to support you in the fact that like KJ Appa released an album last month.
Did he?
Which I enjoyed. I'm pretty sure most people would not like it, but I liked it because it's like my kind of music.
What kind of music is it?
I contributed to, it's like a blues fusion music.
Oh, cool.
I mean, his band tattoos all up and down his arms is not a lie. It's like Van Halen stuff and all that kind of. I think it's probably like blues, Stevie Ray Vaughan influenced.
I know he's like kind of like country mixed with Australian, like Australian country or whatever is his thing. He's very like crunchy hippie. His girlfriend just had like a baby, and they like live when they can in like middle of nowhere Australia or something like that. Like he's not LA CW or Toronto CW type of person or Vancouver CW type of person, but very cool.
Yeah, his aesthetic as Archie versus his aesthetic outside of Archie is startling.
Yeah.
Like everybody else, it's not exactly the same, but it's adjunct. His is polar opposite.
I follow Madeline Petch. I don't know how she says her last name, but I subscribed to her on YouTube at one point, like back ages ago, and she does a bunch of like these like fitness, lifestyle, whatever stuff. There's a little Cheryl in there. Like you can see it. It's there. And she is actually a redhead as well. So okay, well, that wraps up what I watched this week. I watched a bunch of other stuff. I watched The Good Doctor. I watched Supergirl. I watched Stargirl. All of that. We'll catch up on some of that next week. But for this week, I mostly just want to talk about Only Murders in the Building and plug that I caught up on Riverdale, and that I read 37% of a book. So
I'm so proud of you.
thank you so much. And it wasn't even work related or research. So
very good.
All right. Well, I will talk to you same time, same place next week, which I think will have a finale of like the finale of
That
Supergirl.
is the finale.
Yeah.
I guess Supergirl, but also Only Murders in the Building.
Yes. That as well. And I think Stargirl finale. I could be wrong about that. And I believe the return of Batwoman. There's a lot of TV returning and ending. Everything's off cycle right now, and it's kind of weird, but also the Bachelor in Paradise finale wrapped, and then we skipped a week this week of any content. But next week, Michelle's season starts.
I almost escaped. I almost got out of it.
You should watch
Dang
it. She's a good person. And
it. I'm
every one of the
sure she
30
can be a good
guys
person
trying
all
to
day long.
every single one of the 30 guys trying to court her is, I'm sure, truly deeply terrible, but she seems like such a good person.
Which is all the more reason for me not to watch it.
Okay, well, I will definitely not talk about it then next week. Bye.